This is a podcast about a college athlete and a guy that definitely would not have talked to her in college. Now they get paid to talk to each other broadcasting basketball games, although they don't get paid to do this podcast yet.
Welcome in. It is the second edition of The Athlete and the guy that would not have talked to her in college. She's Meghan McEwen.
Hi, I am Meghan McEwen, and he's Joel Cadet.
I took your line.
You did. It's okay, but we can keep it rolling like this.
I feel like I've resigned myself to the fact that the name's just going to get shortened. Like, remember 8 Simple Rules for dating my teenage daughter just became 8 Simple Rules?
8 Simple Rules, yeah.
It's going to become The Athlete and the Guy.
Yeah.
Which I'm fine being the guy.
I don't hate that. It's kind of funny.
Yeah.
It's hard to tweet out because Twitter only lets you have so many characters.
We didn't think that through when we came up with a name. We chose one that uses all of our Twitter characters.
Correct. Like, you just send out one tweet and it's all the characters taken up with the title.
Yeah. A lot to get to on this edition of the show, though. We're going to dive into baseball. We will talk transferring and Meghan's absolute hate of it right now in the college basketball world. We'll update you on whether or not sports will happen in this COVID-19 society in which we live. Little TMI and a little pop culture as well. Meghan, shall we get right to it?
Let's go.
You think football is still fun?
Zero fun, sir.
Basically, I like outdoor sports, but indoor sports have their place too.
Dive into baseball to lead things off on today's show. We're joined by the national baseball writer for the Wall Street Journal and author of Swing Kings, Inside of Baseball's Home Run Revolution. Jared Diamond joins us with a T-shirt from the greatest institution on the face of the planet.
Oh, yeah.
Second greatest.
Wore this shirt just for the occasion.
Jared, let's talk about whether or not baseball will be a thing this summer. One half says so, one half is like, where's the truth lie?
Look, I think ultimately baseball is going to work this out and try to start a season. What that means, will it finish? What happens once they start? Absolutely no idea. But I think they're far enough down the road at this point that barring something really unforeseen in the next 2 to 4 weeks, they're going to try to start. Now, there's still hurdles to clear. 2 big pillars they need to jump over. One is the health and safety component. Major League Baseball is in the process of sending all of their proposals about health and safety to the Players Union. Supposed to send them this, 185-page document that outlines everything about testing, about social distancing, about all these different protocols that the union's going to look over. And essentially with that, it's really binary. It's either the league can convince the players they're going to be safe or they can't. There's really no middle ground. I don't think there's much room to negotiate that. The league is going to have access to the testing it has access to, and the players are going to have to decide whether that's enough. The other issue, of course, is the economics, which is a big problem right now. The league and the union are so far apart in that, but as far apart as they are and as intense as the rhetoric has been, at the end of the day, I'm confident that both sides here recognize that not playing baseball because of money would just be a suicidal outcome. It would destroy the industry if they have to tell the American population, hey, we had this whole plan to play, but we couldn't figure out how to divide up the money. So I think cooler heads will prevail there ultimately.
What is the issue financially at this point? It was prorated salaries first off, which seemingly makes sense. If I'm paying you for 162 games and you play 82 games, that would make sense. The issue, I think, turns to the revenue sharing side of it. What is the big hiccup on the player's perspective?
So the owners say that it is not financially feasible to play games without fans and still pay the players those prorated salaries. This agreement where the players agreed to take their prorated salaries also included a provision that said that the 2 parties would discuss the feasibility of playing without fans. Well, the league has now come back to the union saying it's not feasible. We would lose money. We just simply, it's their position, the leagues, is that it would make more financial sense to not play than to play and still pay the players prorated salary. Now, do the players believe that? No. They're in the process of getting all this information from the league. They're going to ask the league to sort of prove it, show us that that's true. So the league's response to this point has been, well, we want to do this revenue sharing plan where we just take the amount of money at the end of the year, we divide it up, similar to the other sports. Well, to the players in baseball, this is the non-starter. They've never had a system like this. It is sort of tantamount to a salary cap in their minds, which, coming close to collective bargaining time, They want to present strength. They don't want to give the league an inch. And I understand why, because this is something they really feel strongly about, that there is no salary cap in baseball, never has been, and in their mind, never will be. So where do you go from there? Both sides sort of say, this is our position. I think there's probably some other approaches. The league, I think, recognizes at this point that the union is not going for this revenue sharing plan. And where they go from here, I don't know. One idea that's sort of been whispered that I've heard from a bunch of different people, sort of very, very quietly, had not really been discussed formally at all, is the league potentially asking players to defer large portions of their salary. We'll pay you 20% now or 15% now, and we will pay you the rest out over the next X number of years. That sounds like something that maybe the players would at least consider. At the end of the day, I think they find somewhere where everyone's happy.
From what you've gathered from who you've talked to and the pulse you have on this, are the players more concerned about the health and safety of this matter, or are they more concerned about getting paid?
It's funny. And the health and safety component, it really depends on who you're talking about. Baseball players, obviously there's a lot of them. They don't have much consensus on many issues. And there's certainly some players like Sean Doolittle and his now famous Twitter thread where he outlined all the health and safety issues for whom this is an enormous issue. Now there's many others for whom this is much less of an issue. There's obviously a geographical and political component to this. Many baseball players, most of them really, come from places where there is no coronavirus and hasn't been. They tend to be in the South or in places in sort of rural California, rural Texas. They also tend to skew politically conservative and get their news from conservative sources that may be suggesting that it's not as bad as other people might think it is. So I think by and large, the players recognize there's some risk, but are generally willing to accept it. But what I think they're not willing to accept is they know they are taking a risk. Everyone understands that. They're now being told you have to take a risk with your health and your family's health, even if it's in their mind, a relatively small risk. And, oh, by the way, we're going to cut your pay in addition to that, where they're saying, hey, we're the ones assuming the risk here. The owners are not going to leave their homes to play this season, right? They're just going to watch the games on TV like everybody else. We're the ones traveling around the country, so we shouldn't have our pay cut too. So I think it's a little of both. I think everyone realizes that there's a halfway, that this is going to be a terrible year revenue-wise for Major League Baseball. And I think everyone gets that. But when you factor in that they've already agreed to take what would amount to 50% pay for half the games and, go risk their health and their family's health, they're like, all right, you got to give us something here.
I read an article in Sports Illustrated that suggested fans are maybe a little frustrated by what can come across as a bit tone deaf from the players. Oh, I'm not going to make my however many millions. It's only going to be this many million. How concerned are the players regarding the optics of, not getting paid when there is no salary cap and not getting paid as much as they should be owed? Or is that not even a concern?
No, it is a concern to an extent. I think if you're part of the Baseball Players Union or work for the Baseball Players Union, you are aware at this point that you will never win the court of public opinion, ever. That's just the way it's always been, is that the fans will always view the players as greedy and intractable and unwilling to compromise. And that was the case after the strike of 1994, which was over a salary cap, by the way, over the owners trying to implement a salary cap. And generally, the union's attitude is like, whatever, like it's not our responsibility to win the court of public opinion because we never will anyway. We have to do what's right by our clients. But in this particular case, I think what has the players so upset is, and why I think they believe that people should be on their side, is that they, Major League Baseball is going to have a very bad year. They're going to lose a lot of money this year. They're not going to make nearly as much as what they're used to making. And the players are like, hey, every year the owners make more and more and more money. And when they have a year where they make $1 billion more than they ever anticipated for whatever reason, they don't come to us and say, hey, we made an extra $1.5 billion. We're going to share it with you. But when all of a sudden they're going to have a terrible year for the first time in a really long time, they're rushing to the players going, oh, we have to share in this burden. So the players are going, hey, like, I see you want to socialize your losses, but you never want to socialize your gains.
And that was kind of Trevor Bauer's point when he said, hey, that's why it's leaked out that the owners agreed to something, because then we look like the bad guys.
That's 100% true. Presented as the owners agreed to a plan to restart baseball. So that if it doesn't happen, it's the evil players refuse to let baseball come back.
So you and your colleagues also broke the testing news this week on how that would all purport to happen if a season resumes. And I'm curious, one of the things that you said was that positive tests would not shut the season down. But where does the complication become if you get 10 guys on a team that test positive? And if a team becomes a hotspot, and the quirks that could throw into a schedule of a season?
Yeah, that's like the big question that nobody seems to want to address. And instead want to push it aside. Go, we're just not going to let that happen. Well, of course they can't guarantee that won't happen, especially since they're not going to test players every day, at least under the current proposal. They'd be testing 3 days a week. It was described to me as more often than once a week, but less often than once a day. I think it's supposed to be 3 times a week, but they're still working it out. And also the testing they're going to have access to is not the rapid test, which don't even work anyway, apparently. So I guess that's fine. But they're going to take 24 hours to get the results in. So you're going to have a player get tested, play in the game, and then find out potentially he was positive the next day. And then by then, of course, he could spread it to the entire team. So no one really wants to address that possibility. Of course, it is one. Baseball insists that between the amount of testing they're going to do, the symptom checking, and the sort of social distancing within the ballpark, they believe they'll be able to stamp out an outbreak, like a bad outbreak. Now, could it happen, and what would happen? Yeah, it would be really bad. I mean, look, there's a reason why these teams are going to have like 50 players available, but only 25 at a time, right? It's, I don't mean to sound very crude about it, but it's almost as if Major League Baseball is like, well, we have like a replacement team who has not been at the ballpark, so we always can just sub in like 12 of them at once if they have to. I know that's kind of ridiculous to say, but I think that's sort of what they're thinking now, and they're kind of crossing their fingers that they don't end up in the situation where 15 guys from a team get sick. And if they do, that's why I said at the beginning of this, I have no idea what happens when the season starts. They might play for a month and have to shut things down. They may get through the whole year without a hitch. I don't think anyone knows.
I know the governor in Florida, Ron DeSantis, has basically said, like, we're here.
We're open for business. We want baseball here.
If you need us. Is it a complete non-starter to play in spring? I mean, if there's no fans, why does it matter? Why not play in spring training ballparks? Or does that then present a whole nother union issue with guys basically quarantining away from their families?
So that was the original idea, to bring everybody to Arizona only, do all the games there. Or then there was an Arizona and Florida plan. I wouldn't even call them a plan, more like an idea. And they never really got off the ground. And there's a few reasons why. One of them you mentioned is that the players were just not interested, and understandably, by going to be quarantined in a hotel room for 4 months, going nowhere besides the hotel and the ballpark, probably away from their families. So if you bring in the families, you now have to test many, probably thousands of additional people and keep them in that bubble. It was never going to happen. That's one thing for the NBA to do.
What's different in that case from like them being around their families in Cincinnati or Pittsburgh? Or
well, they're not doing they're not trying to quarantine them. They're just saying
they're basically just punting on that part of it.
They're not quarantining. They're going to have them to be, use common sense social distancing, but it's not as if they're telling them you cannot leave. And the Arizona plan's like, you're in a biodome. We are not going anywhere besides the hotel, the bus, the ballpark, the hotel, the bus, the ballpark, and nowhere else. Food
It's
will
like
only be
jail.
delivered. Yeah, it would have been like jail. And I think something like that is actually possible in another sport, like the NBA. If they told the NBA players we're going to do the postseason in Orlando or in Las Vegas in a biodome, I think it's doable. We're talking about a month. You're talking about every week. You're talking about fewer players being involved, right? Because teams lose, they're done. And I think for the players that are not going to the finals, they might be more amenable to doing it for 4 weeks. I think it's more likely in that sport, especially if the NBA were to say, not that this is fair, but they just say, all right, the season's over. Playoffs start now. Sorry if you were going for the 8th seed, but screw you. Like, too bad. we're just going to have the playoffs, do it all in one place. I think it's doable. But to do that for 4 months and try to play 100 games that way, it just wasn't going to happen. There were other problems too. I mean, the weather in Arizona was a big problem. They never really quite got around that it's about 6,000 degrees in Arizona in the summer, and talking about playing outdoors every day. And yeah, you could play at night, but one, it's still really hot in Phoenix at night in the summer. And two, it's on the West Coast. So you can't be playing games involving East Coast teams at 11 o'clock at night or midnight when it's exclusively a television product. It makes no sense. The other issue was that TV networks were not thrilled with that plan because they felt like the facilities for the quality of the broadcast was not high enough for what would be an exclusively TV product. There would be no replay availability. Baseball didn't like that. Teams didn't like that they would not be able to get their sponsorship money from in-stadium ads that would be shown on TV in their ballpark. So you put that all together, and that plan just kind of fell apart.
Wow.
Social distancing rules. You wrote about relief pitchers sitting in stands until they're needed. What other types of measures are we potentially looking at?
Yeah, you're talking about a complete overhaul of what the clubhouse looks like, what the dugout looks like, what the bullpen looks like, trying to keep players sort of not just sitting right next to each other on the bench. I mean, the reality is you don't really have to be, right? It's not like in the NBA or football where you're like, you got to go in right now. No, there's plenty of time to like get the player you need to bring in. You could have the player sitting in the locker room and just be like, you got to come in and get in the game now, or sitting in the stands or whatever. There's ways to do this. Exactly what it looks like, not sure yet. They're talking about other things like no spitting, no high fives.
There's no way.
Right?
How do you control that? It's like somebody said with hockey, no fighting. How are you going to control that?
Yeah, I don't think they really are. People that are asking this, I don't think it's the situation where baseball is going to like suspend you or fine you if you spit, I think it's more of a put the thought in your mind that you're not supposed to. There's just that little barrier in the back of your mind, like, oh, right, I'm not supposed to do that now. And just having that little thought will sort of maybe prevent guys from impulsively doing the stuff they normally do. Of course, it's not going to stop it completely, but I do think there's something to be said of like, hey guys, like we really shouldn't be doing this. Just keep it in mind. And if it takes away 30% of the high fives or spitting there would have been, it's better than nothing. And also just the ballpark access will be different. Like how many people could be in the locker room at a time, or how often everything gets cleaned, and how often the bathroom gets cleaned, and who's really allowed in the stadium, and times will be staggered. And, like group X, a few guys at a time are going to go into the locker room to shower, not everybody all at once. It's things like that. Does any of this matter? I don't know. I have no clue. I don't know if anyone really knows, but baseball wants to at least give the impression that it's doing its best to do right by everybody health-wise. And these are some of the ideas they're coming up with.
At this point in time, based off of what you've heard, who you've talked to, how soon could we see baseball return?
Well, the goal is to have it back by that first weekend of July 4th weekend. You could probably guess why. I would love to say that there's this brilliant scientific explanation and lots of data that shows that July 1st, 4th weekend is the perfect time to bring baseball back.
COVID is very patriotic, Jared.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think that's really the case. But again, we know why they want to come back then. You can imagine what the marketing is going to be around baseball back on July 4th. If you're tired of the commercials from like car dealerships and things trying to get you to buy cars right now, this will be 100 times worse. Baseball is back on the 4th of July. It's going to be quite a thing. But in order to make that happen, the clock is ticking. They really need to have a deal in place by the end of the month. The other thing that if things really go south and they just cannot get this worked out for a long time, one thing that's at least been internally bounced around, like let's say we could start in September. Well, okay, we're not going to have a season starting in September or October, but what if we came up with some, NCAA tournament style bracket where we play for 6 weeks and, figure out something fun, make it some crazy TV product. It would be better than nothing, I think, in everybody's mind who likes baseball. So these are all the things in play, but they have about 2 weeks to get this done if they want to hit their July 4th goal.
His name is Jared Diamond. He is a one-time Media Cup champion at Syracuse. right?
One is better than 0.
Yeah, but I got 3, my man.
But it was my senior year that we won, which is the only one that counts.
Yeah, that's the one I lost. So, Jared, from the Wall Street Journal, author of Swing Kings, Inside Baseball's Home Run Revolution. It's been out for almost 2 months now.
Oh my God, 6 weeks. March 31st was the release day.
It's on my. I've read 3 books now since quarantine, so it is in my. I'm very excited to get to it.
Thank you.
So, mazel tov on that, and good talking to you again.
Yeah, you too, guys. Thanks so much.
So a lot to digest there, Megan. The good news is that hopeful there should at least be a baseball season. And I got to be honest, I don't know if I disagree with the players' perspective on it. Like, the prorated thing makes sense. If I'm going to play 80 games, then pay me for 80 games, not 162 games. But the revenue sharing side of it is weird to say, hey, we're going to make X amount of money. We don't know what that's going to be. We'll give you half of that. We're going to keep half of that. Like, the inherent risk of owning a baseball team is you're going to have good years and bad years. It's not the player's fault.
I understand it from their perspective. At the end of the day, it is your job. You deserve to show up and get paid. That being said, in this day and age, I think they're going to draw a lot of criticism that they are being seen as greedy athletes, especially in a time where people have lost their jobs during this pandemic and they can't afford to go to the grocery store and feed their families. So the fact that this is going to potentially come down to give me my money or else I'm not going to play, even though you have taken all these measures to potentially be the first league to come back and play and give the world sports that we've been missing for the last 2 months. I don't know if that's going to do more harm than good from a PR standpoint for Major League Baseball.
But at the end of the day, like, the PR doesn't matter. Like, if I'm a baseball player, I don't care if you are happy with me, because at the end of the day, fans are still going to come to the games when they're allowed to eventually. They're still going to watch them if they're on TV again. They're still going to root for them. Like, 1994 was about money. They came back in 1995. Like, this will all have short memories as to why there's an issue right now. And if I'm the player, I'm not the entrepreneur. I'm the baseball player.
It just makes me laugh that they're frustrated. They're like, the owner's getting all this money. Welcome to America and capitalism. This is how everything works. The CEOs get all the money and the workers don't.
But players have a contract.
Of course. Well, a lot of employees have contracts as well. So we'll see what happens. It's going to be interesting. I think both sides bring logical arguments to the table. At the end of the day, it's going to be a matter of how badly do we want to make this happen? Who's going to make the sacrifice?
The health side of it is the interesting one as well. And we talked a little bit about that with Jared. One of the reasons that baseball is going to be able to play from a health side is a robust testing and contract tracing system. They're going to test players. If a player tests positive, you're pulled away. And everybody that you have come into contact with is then tested and watched or maybe quarantined, however they're going to wind up working that out. Here's the thing. That's what they're going to do to play baseball. That is also what we need to do to go to work at the office again. It's not a debate of everyone has to stay home and the economy has to stay closed, or we all have to go back to work. The reason baseball is going to play again is because they're going to test and trace everybody. If we tested and traced everybody, society would run a little bit more normally. So for me, it's just intriguing to see how we need sports. So sports is going to have to do this. We should all do that in our regular lives too.
I like that.
Well, it's what they're doing in other countries.
Yeah, when the question is how are we so-called the greatest nation in the world and we haven't come up with this idea yet?
Oh, we've come up with the idea.
Haven't put it into motion. Haven't taken the steps to put it into motion. All I'm saying is I am ready to go to a restaurant and sit outside and order a glass of wine and see people walk by and people watch. Some of my favorite pastimes.
Where that becomes a bigger issue, though, right now is baseball is first up on the docket. We talked about it last week. College sports is one of the next things up on the docket. And there's been, Sports Illustrated wrote that article this week where they talked to Jack Swarbrick and the 10 conference commissioners. about whether or not we might have a football season. And we're all sitting here asking ourselves these questions. Well, what do we have to do? What we have to do is that. We have to have testing. We have to have contact tracing. And if we do that, we can go to college. We can play college football. Like,
Right.
Again, there's
Society doesn't have to be shut down.
The Bundesliga is playing in Germany for a reason. Other parts of the country, like, we didn't shut down just so that in 2 months we could reopen again. Like, we had to use that time effectively, and that time is to ramp up testing and tracing. And while we're all driving ourselves nuts about how we can play sports again, I think the answer is pretty simple.
I completely agree with you. It's interesting reading that article and hearing what all the different commissioners have to say, because some commissioners have a different perspective at being in charge of a mid-major league as opposed to a Power 5 conference. It all comes down to protecting the athletes, and the one way you can do that is, again, by ramping up the testing. Overall, the vibe I got from reading what everyone has to say, number one, everybody wants there to be sports, and that's the thing. When people get frustrated by the conservative approach that some are taking, it's not as if these commissioners don't want football to be played this fall. Football brings in billions of dollars to these conferences and to these institutions through TV deals, through ticket sales, etc. You go down the list and you can name it. But the issue is going to be, how do you keep these athletes safe? And you can do it, again, by ramping up the testing. But at the end of the day, no one knows what's going to happen. And there's so many different cooks in the kitchen at this point. My question is, who's going to step up and just be like, here's what we're doing, and here's where it's happening?
All right, topic 2. Let's get in depth when it comes to the transfer rule.
#Dave.
Switching gears now to the NCAA, and some news that popped up earlier this week. Purdue head basketball coach Matt Painter went on to Dan Dockich's radio show in Indianapolis and discussed the recent transfers that he's had from his university. And this came as a shock to me, Joel. I know we keep our eye on the Big Ten, being that is the area that we live in. So Matt Harms and Nojel Eastern, both pretty big hitters for Purdue basketball, decided to transfer. Harms earlier in the offseason decided to go to BYU with the beautiful hair. Matt Harms, you should just Google Matt Harms' hair. It's actually like quite the
mine doesn't do it the same.
You don't have it. You're also not 7'3", 7'2", 7'3". And I hate to say this because, like, I'm pretty tall, and, like, obviously basketball players are tall, but it never fails me to realize how short I am when I stand next to Matt Harms and I'm interviewing him, and, like, the mic is like, you're like this up in the air.
Welcome to my world.
And then on the other hand, Nojel Eastern, guard for Purdue, also announced that he was going to transfer just last week. And
It took like 3 days for him to wind up at Michigan, by the way.
And now he's at Michigan, which, again, transferring within the conference is beyond me. So an interesting point Matt Painter brought up is these players want to come be pros, but let's work on being an all Big Ten player before we go down that route. So it was an interesting interview that he and the comments that he made, and it kind of caused a little bit of a stir. There are two sides to this. One, should athletes be able to transfer and not have to sit out and just be eligible to play right away at their new school? Or on the other hand, should athletes have to sit out for a year and then become eligible the following year?
And that's on the table right now. That's what the NCAA is discussing.
The NCAA is discussing if athletes should be able to transfer and be eligible right away to play.
In basketball, football, and I believe baseball is the only other one. I think it's those 4. Because in every other sport, they're currently allowed the one-time transfer exemption as long as they're released by their previous institution. So across the board, what they're talking about adding in football, basketball, baseball, something that other sports already deal with on a day-to-day basis.
I am against the idea that athletes should be allowed to transfer and be immediately eligible. Now, that being said, there are situations in which transferring is something that is in the best case for the athlete. That being said, it's just not the right fit, okay? Like, sometimes that just happens. You get there, you don't realize it, it's just not for you. Maybe the academics are too hard. Maybe there's a family emergency at home and you need to get back closer geographically to your family to be there. Or maybe you're just not going to play and you thought you had a chance to, and you want to make some impact on a team in your college career.
Coaching change, as much as people hate that one.
Right.
You pick a school in part because of the people you'll be around.
Right. So like there are scenarios in which you should be able to transfer and become immediately eligible. And I'm not against people transferring in general and having to sit out a year. What I'm against is student athletes going to a school, being handed a little bit of a challenge or dealing with a little bit of adversity, saying, that's not for me, peace out, and taking the easy way out and going to another school. Coaches take so much time. They spend so much money. And I see this firsthand with my father being a college basketball coach. He sits and talks on the phone all night to recruits. That's all they do, is they put so much time and effort into getting to know these players and getting to know the families and taking home visits, investing in these people's lives. And for recruits to say, oh, I didn't know what I was getting into. No, like you did. You took 5 unofficial visits and an official visit, and you got a phone call from the coaching staff for however many times a week that's allowed. So for kids to come in after all that time was spent and all that money was spent, and to deal with a little bit of adversity and, oh crap, coach is making me go to class. No one ever made me go to class. I don't want to go to class. And deciding to transfer as a result, you should not be rewarded. That's robbing these student athletes of a lifetime lesson they could learn.
My question to you, Megan, is this. We talked about Joel Eastern and Matt Harms transferring from Purdue, most likely the reasons that Matt Painter had a lot to get off of his chest on the radio this past week. In both of their cases, Matt Harms is a graduate transfer. He is allowed to transfer and play immediately. Joel Eastern, we don't know for sure yet, but there's some speculation that he may have to sit out. So a sit one to play one by going to Michigan, he's going to have to take that year in residence upon transferring. My question is, do you really think in that case that the sitting out is ultimately that much of a deterrent? So
right. If
people are going to transfer having to sit out anyway, and the sitting out is so inconsistently applied right now because it's like Oprah's handing out waivers, like, look under your chair.
You get one and you get one.
100%. So let's try to find some broader consistency. Is sitting out to you that much of a deterrent? And is it really necessarily fair to the kid? Why not just let them transfer then the one time? If you got it wrong the first time, we'll give you a do-over on it and give you that opportunity to go do it, particularly when in virtually every other sport, they're already granted that opportunity.
That being said, when you look at a player like Joel Eastern, who just finished his junior year at Purdue, correct?
Correct.
Just finished his junior year. You're telling me it took 3 years for you to figure out that program wasn't for you?
A lot of relationships take a long time to dissolve.
3 years, junior year, that is absolutely mind-boggling to me. And then to
How many people get divorced after a decade?
Listen, at the end of the day, you're so close to the finish line. You're telling me after all the time that Purdue has invested in Joel Eastern, he's just going to chuck up the deuces and leave?
Well, I don't know what in particular Joel Eastern's case was, the rationale that led to him transferring, all of the reasons that led to him transferring. I'm just looking at it from a broader perspective. Athletes in virtually every sport right now are allowed to transfer, granted they're released by their previous institution, and play right away.
You're setting a dangerous precedent by allowing athletes
every other sport.
But here's the thing, from a coach and institution standpoint, all that money that you just went down the drain because you wasted it on a player who didn't want to go to class.
It happens in every other sport. And I get, there's a lot more money involved in football and basketball in particular. So odds of tampering and that kind of thing, sure, that could potentially happen. But let's also be honest, you're kidding yourself if it doesn't happen right now. With people
when are you going to learn in life? What better time to learn to deal with resilience? Because you know what? Life's not fair. Life isn't easy. At what point, where are you going to learn how to deal with somebody that you don't want to deal with? How are you going to learn how to deal with a difficult coach? Now, if it's abusive or if it is damaging to your mental health, okay, those are the exemptions. Those are the outliers. But you're setting a dangerous precedent by telling these kids, hey, if you don't want to deal with, having to go to class or having to get up at 6 a.m. to work out, you can leave.
Listen, I don't disagree with a lot of what you're saying, and the facing adversity, that is all very legitimate. Like there are, I'm sure, of the 894 as of our recording of this show, Division I transfers in the portal right now.
Which is so many, by the way.
That's almost 3 per team across Division I college basketball. I'm sure of the 894, 500 more or more of them were just like, yeah, like, there's a guy in front of me and I don't want to work hard enough to get in front of him. Like, I'm sure there's a large chunk of that number that are in that situation. However, that being said, I still think they should have the one-time transfer exemption there to go, hey, you know what? I'm going to try it somewhere else. And if maybe that's the better fit for me and maybe that's the right fit for me. And you know what? If you're running away from adversity because you don't want to work hard or you don't want to outwork somebody else, that's going to chase you wherever else you go. That's a you problem. That's not a systemic problem. That is a thing that a coach that's recruiting you should be aware of and could run into at your next institution. But all I'm saying is if you go to a soccer team right now, you're allowed to transfer from University X to University Z and play immediately the next year. Like, for the most part.
But that's the precedent you're about to set in women's basketball and men's basketball and football.
Because every other sport already has that rule. Like, you're not seeing entire soccer teams going through free agency because I don't like it here, I'm going to try something new. I think you're assuming people are going to take advantage of the rule in a way that they haven't across other sports right now for the last forever.
But football and basketball are different with the revenue that comes in with those and with the name, image, likeness that comes in that we're going to start seeing. We might start seeing, if you allow certain players to come in, oh, I can make more money with my name, image, or likeness at X school instead of Y school, and then immediately transfer as a result. That's a whole nother aspect you're going to bring in there that could cause people to transfer. And at the end of the day, what I love about the NCAA and what I love about college sports is there's more of a team aspect to it. We're going to see 894 people in the transfer portal. That's insane. Listen to that. How do you create any sort of team or any sort of chemistry going from year to year if you're having so many people leave after the end of the season? That's like a pro sport.
All right, I'm going to do an about face here for a second because I've made the one argument, and I do believe they should be able to transfer one time and not sit out. That is 100% the right decision, and I also think that's the decision that's going to happen.
Here's my other thing. It's 100% going to happen. That decision is 100% going to happen, but I don't like it.
Now, that said, I am all about advocating for that change to benefit the student athlete. That said, let me come around to your perspective on something here, Megan, because we mentioned the 894 transfers in the portal for men's college basketball this year. Jeff Goodman wrote a story for Stadium that analyzed transferring this past year, and he picked out the 50 guys in college basketball that transferred up to a Power 5 school, which, number one, if there's 894 transfers and 50 of them went to a Power 5, let's talk about numbers for a second. Of those 894, I think a lot of them think they're going to a Power 5 school. It's not going to happen that way. That's just the math on it. But of the 50 that transferred up, they went from averaging 12 points per game to 6 points per game. And I think what winds up happening is you get a lot of these situations where everybody always thinks the grass is greener, and it's not. And I think that's what we really need to be talking about here. The deterrent is the sitting out a year. Clearly that's not working. 894 people have already transferred out. Get rid of the sitting out a year. The deterrent needs to be an honest look at, here's the 50 guys that went up to a Power 5 school last year, and here's the numbers they were putting up, and here's the numbers they did put up. So that's what I think players have to consider. All of that said, everybody's case is unique. And we talked about before, I made a list. There are types of transfers. If you're a grad transfer, like Matt Harms, and you're transferring for legitimate graduate school reasons, which is why the rule was implemented, good on you. Like, that is great. That is what college is about. If you're on a team that has never won and you have 1 year left, you're late in your career, you want to try to play in an NCAA tournament, you should probably try to get your current team there. Like, that's the fighting through adversity part. But if you don't think it's going to happen and you want a better shot, you have an offer, you know what? I'm not going to fault you. Everybody wants the chance to play in March Madness. If you want the Power 5 experience late in your career, because you want to fly on charter planes and you want a 2-story locker room and the swag that comes with it, like, there's a difference. I get it. I'm not going to fault you for wanting to experience that for a year. The problem comes in when it's the folks who say, like Matt Painter was talking about, I'm doing this for exposure. I'm doing this because it'll make a difference in the eyes of pro scouts, et cetera, because the stats don't back it up. There are exceptions to the rule, but the stats do not back up making that jump to then impact yourself at a professional level. And the one guy I'll pick out, not to throw individual names out there, but here we go. Jerron Simmons transferred from Ohio University several years ago. He was the best point guard in the Mid-American Conference. He averaged 15.5 points per game and 7 assists.
Great stat line, by the way.
He went to Michigan as a grad transfer. He never played. He played 200 minutes the entire season. Now, what does he want out of that? Did he want to go to Michigan and be the starting point guard? Or did he want to go to Michigan and play in a national championship game? Because he got the second. And if you wanted that, I'm not going to fault you. But if you wanted to go be the stud in the Big Ten, the math says that is not likely to happen. And I think people should blow that stat line up on a giant billboard and hang it in a locker room to say, listen, the grass isn't always greener. But if you want to play in a national title game for 2 minutes, like, I'm not going to fault you. That's fine. Just understand what you're getting yourself into.
And a lot of arguments that people will make sometimes is, I want to transfer to a Power 5 school to get more exposure for the NBA scouts to come and find me. But what we've discussed previously is that if you're good, they're going to come find you. It doesn't matter where you play, because scouts are literally dedicated to finding the best talent in the country. And they will find you if you are out there. It does not matter if you have Michigan or Michigan at University of Philadelphia and Princeton, New Jersey on your jersey.
Northern, you couldn't think of another one in Michigan?
I couldn't. I was trying to go to. I went to
every directional Michigan. They have a north, south, east, and central.
I went to this Nike Elite camp when I was in high school, and like one of the things the guy kept shouting. He was actually Gannon Baker, who's like a big basketball trainer. He was running this camp. He was like, do you want to go to UConn, or do you want to go to UConn at Philadelphia Presbyterian, Jersey, Arizona? And like, just would come up with all these things. So like, that's one of my favorite, like,
that sounds great.
Should try to throw out there. I always thought that was very funny. Do you want to go to Ball State, or do you want to go to Ball State at UMass in Virginia?
It sounds like I've got a lot of options.
So a lot of stitching to put on a jersey.
Listen, bottom line, I don't love transferring at will. I think it's a decision that they should be allowed to make. Let them have the one-time transfer exemption like they do in every other sport, and then see where the chips fall from there.
And again, we have to remember these are 18 to 22-year-olds. Whose maturity level is not quite developed just yet.
And sometimes they need to make a second choice because they're 18 to 22-year-olds and the first choice wasn't the right one.
And sometimes they need to learn how to deal with adversity.
All right, pop culture time.
Rise and shine.
You're dead to me, and you are, because I'm out.
Henley, please accept this route.
Absolutely, I will.
All right, Megan, we are officially on week 17 of quarantine. I don't know. No, I have no. I
feels like it.
Yeah. What have you watched to get you through this?
I thought about this earlier. I watched You on Netflix the first week of quarantine, and it feels like that was years ago.
You watched me.
Oh, are you saying you're creepy?
No, you said you. You said you watched You.
The show You. Wait, did you not know that? Or are you just
I don't have Netflix, so I don't know what that show is.
Why don't you have Netflix?
I don't know why.
Wait, why don't you have Netflix?
I have cable. What do you
What do you do with yourself?
I have 1,800 channels.
Wow. Well, you
I
can't
don't watch anything
at your own pleasure, at your own disposal. So I watched Tiger King. Didn't you watch Tiger King?
No. Why are we gonna watch that? So here's my thing. Why are we watching Tiger King? Like, we literally made a show about a woman. We made a woman who might have fed her husband to a tiger famous.
The fact that you know that just shows how powerful.
But why are we doing that? Nobody deserves.
Interesting.
Howard Baskin doesn't deserve to be famous.
I don't know. I think it's pretty fascinating. You got to watch the show, but you can't complain about it because you haven't watched it.
Yeah, but it's fascinating. She shouldn't be famous. Why are we giving her attention?
Have you heard the Carol Baskin Savage remix that has gone?
No, I don't want to know anything about this woman.
Well, you know what, Joel? Want to know what's great? You don't have to. That is what's great about being in America. You do not have to ingest the media that you do not want to.
I have watched a lot of HGTV, though.
Oh, let's hear it. How domestic of you.
Right. So I've learned a couple things. Number one is that people never understand how much money is required to get how much house that they would like. It's always like, I need 6 bedrooms, a screened-in porch, a pool, needs to be in Beverly Hills, and my budget is $210,000. That is always what happens. But number two, I don't know what an HVAC system is, or an HVAC system. I don't know what one does. I assume it's important. However, what I do know is that every single house that is renovated on HGTV always, without fail, needs a new HVAC system, and for some reason, it is always not in the budget and a complete deal breaker. That means that they can't renovate their front entrance anymore. Why on the 50th time it's a shock? Like, when you watch Love It or List It, and the contractor guy comes over to Hillary and goes, Hillary, they needed a new HVAC. And she goes, oh, I can't believe this. Why can't you believe it? Every house ever needs a new HVAC system.
Hill, you've been doing this for how long? How many episodes have we been shooting of this show? Come on.
Without fail.
Are you only watching Love It or List It?
It's on marathons on Tuesdays.
Oh my God.
Property Brothers is, I think, Wednesdays. Property Brothers Forever Home is, I think, on Thursdays. And Flea Market Flip is also a good one. That's on DIY, usually in a marathon setting.
You should put this on your Hinge profile, first off,
Right.
that you watch HGTV. Secondly, do you watch the tiny houses?
I've seen House Hunters Tiny House.
I really enjoy the tiny house shows. I'm always like, oh, I could totally like downsize and live in that. No, I really couldn't. Like,
Could you imagine doing that now?
no, I have a lot of clothes. Like, it wouldn't.
Like in quarantine when you can't leave it.
Hopefully I'd have a Netflix account though. Not, cable, because I'm sure if they have a tiny house, they're probably not using cable.
Satellite.
Do you have Hulu? Like, do you have any sort of streaming service?
I have Prime, but that was an accident because I bought it so that I could get stuff shipped faster, and then I realized that it included television.
Yeah, Amazon Prime's great.
Yeah, that's
TV
good.
wise.
I watch Mrs. Maisel a lot.
I need to watch that. I've heard that's fantastic.
Great. We got the rabbi.
I'm rewatching The Newsroom right now.
On Prime.
Is it on Prime? I'm watching it on HBO Go. It is so good. And I'm a big Aaron Sorkin fan. Love The West Wing. Love The Newsroom. There's another Aaron Sorkin show that I watched that I loved. That being said, I wish that Will McAvoy was a real news anchor in real life, because I think that he would be a great person to guide us during these times on television.
TMI? Too much information. It's just easier to say TMI. I used to say don't go there, but that's lame.
Time now for TMI, too much information. And Joel and I are very good buddies, and we text throughout the week, just, like, oh, this funny thing happened. And Joel keeps me updated with his Hinge profiling and the girls in which
The whole world knows now, so.
It's true. I get some screenshots. I get to kind of like get an idea of like what's going on. And I got a screenshot this week from Joel regarding an interesting situation. And we were discussing, sometimes we say things that we think are funny.
No, they are funny.
Think are funny, but the other person might not find funny. So do you care to elaborate?
No, they're funny.
I mean, I thought it was funny. You sent me the screenshot, and I thought it was funny.
Well, so first off, I deleted my profile since last episode.
Why?
I started over.
Because of my critique of it?
No, most of it, like a lot of it's the same. I answered some different questions, but I was just like, we'll see where this goes. It hasn't gone great. However, I did match with one person who really likes ice cream.
Mm-hmm.
Like has a picture with ice cream. It's very extravagant. Says that like she has ice cream for breakfast sometimes. Question from the class.
Isn't it pretty normal to like ice cream?
Yeah, but like this is
Not
apparently an
a unique
unhealthy
thing.
obsession.
Okay.
So yeah, she loves ice cream. So I said something and like I made a comment and then she matched, but like didn't answer the comment. So like I then have to make a comment again, which is like my pet peeve of how that app works. Like if somebody says something, don't just match, like respond. That's how you like. Otherwise, like I have to. It's an immediate double text, which.
Right.
So I just replied. I thought I was funny. I said, "Which ice cream is your favorite flavor, and why raspberry chocolate chunk from Grater's?" And that got no response.
Which, by the way, is a great flavor on a side note. No, I thought it was like very funny. And she still, how long ago did you do this? To this day?
That was on Monday.
So it's been 4 days.
Yeah. So yesterday, just for kicks, because at this point, what do I have to lose? If you're like from the Ohio area, like, and I go to Cincinnati a bunch. Grater's is a Cincinnati company. UDF, United Dairy Fund, or United Dairy Farmers. I don't know what the F stands for. United Dairy Food. It's another type of like ice cream place you can go to in Ohio.
United Dairy Friends.
With that?
United Dairy Friends.
Also possible. I responded yesterday again just for kicks, and I said, "Ah, crap, you're a UDF person. I've ruined everything." Again, I think that's hilarious. Nothing.
Oh my god, it's so funny. Where's she from?
Somewhere in Ohio.
So she should know what UDF is.
Oh god, yeah.
You know what, Joel? I think that's funny, and I'm sorry that they didn't appreciate it. So, but here's the thing, like, sometimes we think sometimes we say things that we think are funny, but it's kind of a miss. Or, like, you can come across as, like, kind of a jerk.
No, that happened.
I was at a bar, and this guy, came up and started to talk to me, and he was like, "Where'd you go to school?" Like, I went to Ohio State, and I was like, "Oh, I went to Northwestern." And he said, "Oh, I'm sorry." I said, "Why? I'm really smart." And like, he was just like you laugh, like it's funny, like it's a joke. Like, I mean, like it's like, what do you want me to say? Okay. And he was just like, did not know what to say. And I thought it was even more funny that he did not know how to respond to that.
So did you go out with him?
No. I didn't go out with people who went to Ohio State. Let me be clear.
Right. So you proved his point.
Yeah, because I'm smart. I'm just kidding.
So he wasn't wrong.
No, I think he was like, "Oh, I'm sorry, you went to Northwestern." Like, why?
Because he went to Ohio State, and clearly that's a disqualifier. Like if I meet a Gentile.
No, I think he was like, he said it in a tone like, oh my god, funny. But it would be like if he said it in like a tone as if like, "Oh, like your sports teams stink and mine are superior." That's the tone he used.
The women's basketball team.
Northwestern women's basketball team reigning Big Ten champions, mind you. Also, like, Northwestern sports are actually very good, and they have been over the last decade. So enough with that old joke. We're not the laughingstock of the Big Ten anymore. We are the #1 journalism school in the country and the #1 women's basketball team in the Big Ten. You're giving me a peace sign? How nice.
Number 2.
Nice peace sign.
All right, Meg.
So yeah.
This was fun.
Always a good time.
You were outnumbered this week by people from the greatest journalism school in the country.
You had 2 people on for #2 journalism school in the country. You only need 1 Medill kid to make it great.
I'll see you next week.
What?